Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm thrilled today to have with me Lucas Croteau. Before we get started, Lucas, I want to remind our audience that this podcast is sponsored by Core Comply, a nonprofit dedicated to fostering knowledge and experience sharing in life sciences compliance. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have you because you're one of the most, I think, innovative folks around in this area. But before we get into your innovations in compliance, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Yeah, happy to do, Tom, and thanks for having me on here. Looking forward to it. I've been in the consulting world for a better part of 10 years. I got introduced to the compliance space a little over 8 years ago as a partner through that consulting. And for some weird reason, Tom fell in love with transparency reporting in particular. Spent the better part of these past 8 years helping companies establish, build, and manage transparency reporting programs within their organization. First with one of the industry leaders, MediSpend, and then by accident, by starting TracedData, and have certainly been a whirlwind of fun over the past couple of years.
So, I have given lots of talks about compliance over the past 15 years, and anyone who has ever heard me knows I say the following in every talk, which is what are the three most important things about any compliance program? Document, document. So if I can meet a fellow document geek, even if it's different outside my area, man, we're going to bond here. But what I was really intrigued with sort of the start and why I tried to introduce you as an innovator is you saw either a market need or a market opportunity based upon your consulting work, which I assume led you to found Trace Data. And I was wondering if you could tell us about that journey for you.
Yeah, it's always been a unique journey. So, like I mentioned before, I started off in this world working for MediSpend, which provides kind of software in this space. And that kind of started my journey through the transparency reporting and really anything HCP engagement related. Through about 5 years there, I ended up moving on to another organization. I think something magical happened. I had a lot of folks that kind of reached out that I'd worked with previously or in the past asking me to still support them in transparency reporting outside of the software world and more inside their business. So I see the word outsourcing thrown around a lot. I like to use the word insource, and I get in there involved in their business and help them not only build a transparency program, but an efficient transparency program that can be managed ongoing. And through these kind of continual conversations, that's where the gap come in. There's a lot of great tools and solutions out there, but there weren't a ton of people with the expertise to execute on a transparency program that can really complement these technology solutions that exist. So that's where I got my start and really where I saw that niche complementing not only the vendors, but the organizations themselves, pairing those two together and ultimately managing these programs ongoing.
So who is your primary customer base?
Yeah, I work really across the gamut of life sciences, so small to large pharmaceutical and medical device organizations, biotech. My street spot is really in that small to mid size. Generally speaking, as you get larger, there's some needs to have internal people that focus in this area. But I think you find for those small and mid size, they're running lean compliance programs. We're a cog in the wheel, although it's a legal requirement, they have to do it oftentimes they're a little bit pushed to the side and they focus on other expertise and less so on the transparency reporting side. And that's where somebody like myself could really come into play and provide a ton of value.
Early on in my career, I had a sweet spot of clients similar to yours, although mine was anti-corruption compliance. And it was companies anywhere from 20 million to literally 500 million, but certainly too small to have their own dedicated compliance
Yeah.
function. And as you said, once they get larger, you do need to move towards that dedicated. But the problem for those companies probably is the same problem for your clients at that level, which is they have to have something in place literally to do business. It's I wouldn't even say table stakes anymore. If you want to do business literally in any industry, you're going to have some type of compliance program that is auditable and transparent if a
Yeah.
business partner wants to come look at it. And lots of times they do. So it strikes me as doesn't strike me. You are serving a need. And what I get frustrated is smaller companies don't understand they have to have this. And it's really just to do business in literally any industry. So kudos for seeing that opportunity.
I appreciate
You
that.
said something on your website I have to ask you about, which is how does trace data make compliance, quote, easy, end quote?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, easy is the name of the game, right? So for us, again, if you really focus on what I said, our target market is small to mid-sized companies. Oftentimes, they're operating without a formal compliance program, but they have these compliance obligations that they have to still fulfill, or they have a very lean team. And in transparency reporting, it's just a small kind of cog in the wheel. I'll bet a very important one with some pretty serious ramifications. And what we'll generally see in this space is you either have to hire somebody that has the expertise. In such a niche world, there's very few folks that have the expertise in this industry and this particular cog of the wheel here, and they come at a serious cost. Or just funnel this on somebody that maybe doesn't really know what they're doing. They try to piece it together. They do the best they can. They probably hate that they're doing it, and they don't really have the expertise to execute in an efficient manner. So it's hard. I mean, it's hard, right? It's either expensive or it's hard for somebody to accomplish. We've bridged the gap on both of those. This is all we do, transparency reporting. We can get in there. We can do a full assessment of your program. We're now building out that audit ready program for you with documentation, details needed. We interface with the business. And while you're outsourcing, as many would call it, we actually feel like, look like, you can touch us. We talk to people within the business. We feel like a full-time employee to that organization, and they have nothing to worry about. We do everything. We interface, we collect the data, we remediate the data, we work with their third parties, we create the reports, we submit the reports, we provide them the expertise that they don't have in this space. And quite frankly, a lot of these organizations just can't afford because there's more pressing proactive compliance stuff that they need to handle. And we do it for a fraction of the cost of an FTE. And oftentimes we're asked, like, how does that happen? And you'll probably see some quotes on our website from clients and testimonials, but fundamentally, it's because this is all we do. And if you do a really good job setting up foundation, setting up the program, building these repeatable processes, training your business and your third parties on how to do this appropriately, we don't feel like it actually needs to be a full-time job. And we can do it for a fraction of the cost that it would take for you to hire somebody.
So in the podcast world, we say go niche to go big. And I think I just heard you say the same thing.
That's it. Yep, exactly. This is our focus.
So typically, what are the areas of data capture needed in life sciences compliance?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. These vary certainly depending on the business and how they operate. There's the standard ones, right? Your T&E systems, whether it's Concur or Expensify, whatever it might be for your food and beverage capture. There's your ERP tools that capture your consulting payments, probably your grants and some of that other information. But then there's a lot of auxiliary ones that kind of pop up, whether you're using third-party CROs to manage research, you do in-house research. You might have some other third parties that are doing events on your behalf. As you spread across the gamut into other countries, there's different obligations that you could have these little brochures, right? These, we call them leave behinds or reprints in the industry, that you go to a doctor's office and you leave kind of these pamphlets. Those have inherent value that have to be captured, tracked, monitored, and ultimately reported on. So there's all kinds of varying levels potentially reportable. And that's really where we start, is trying to define what those might be so that we can build a plan around how do we do that information.
Lucas, it strikes me that many of the conversations you have with potential customers and with customers are not going to be with a compliance professional. They may not be with a general counsel or legal type. You may be talking to the founder, you may be talking to the CEO, you may be talking to the business people. How do you help them understand their general compliance obligations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're spot on. A lot of times we're not dealing with compliance, we're dealing with companies pre-compliance. And oftentimes they're in a little bit of a whirlwind, right? Because they maybe just got FDA approval or they're expecting it. They know they have some of these things that are happening. So when we talk about making things easy, one, for us, it's an easy thing to explain because it's a legal requirement, but they don't have a choice. This is something they have to do. But then secondarily, when it comes about how do we do it? That's where we can really ingrain ourselves in the business. And a lot of times these companies, they don't necessarily want to know the X's and O's. They just want to feel comfortable that you know the X's and O's, you can accomplish those, and you can provide status reports. And that's what we do. I mean, we give them a level of security that we know what we're doing. We have the references to back that up. We have the clients or that we can showcase to back that up that fit their model. And ultimately we can execute. There are in this world a lot of important things that happen all at once. And these are one of these things that we can take off their plate. They don't have to worry about, and we give them the information they need to be successful.
What is the evolution of spend reporting in your industry? And does it actually present not only challenges, but opportunities?
This is a great question, Tom. It's really an ever-changing landscape here. It seems every year there's new countries that have obligations, new states that are coming out with rules and requirements. The federal government is changing within the United States, their expectations around the data capture. So it really is all the time. It's hard to keep your thumb on top of all these changes and evolutions. And that's an interesting opportunity, certainly across the gamut, whether it's including artificial intelligence into your business, certainly to be able to evolve and change as these data capture requirements adjust and evolve, whether it's partnering with folks like myself or some of these other organizations that provide services to manage and track this information in those evolutions across the industry. But the one thing I can say is the space is not going away. It's only expanding, and there's certainly a need for folks that can expand with it. Certainly what we're here to do.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is the role of AI in reporting across all areas of compliance. I'm writing a 5-part blog post series this week on that topic. So when I had the chance to talk to you about the role of AI
Yeah.
in reporting in life sciences compliance, I couldn't pass this up. Where do you see AI maybe at this point? Are you looking at it for trace data? Are
Yeah.
clients bringing their questions? I'm sure they're bringing their questions to you, but how do you see this evolution maybe now and maybe down the road a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think right now there's a lot of awesome opportunity. I think it's a little bit of the Wild West out there. Certainly as AI continues to present itself, I think there's a lot of countries and jurisdictions here that are trying to minimize the risk that's associated with that. I think in the life science world, there's generally an appetite for AI to be involved in their business, but there's also a little bit of a fear about what does that actually mean. And then I think secondarily to that, which I think is unique, is everybody is now an AI company today, whether they're an AI company. I think really as a consumer within this space, understanding like what is AI, like what does that actually mean? And how do you use that to impact your business? And are you really working with vendors that are involving artificial intelligence and to what extent? So I think that's interesting. There's a great company who's, I'll call it the forefront that works tangentially in the space. That really does a lot of monitoring that I think when it comes to life sciences is at the forefront of AI here and especially around data monitoring. And that's a company by the name of Helio, who's fantastic, a great group. Certainly many people I've worked with over there over the years, but I think it's coming. I think it's here to an extent. But I don't think we truly understand, at least at this point, how it can impact business. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it, thinking about it. How do we incorporate it into our business model? We certainly have some tech on our side that we utilize to help mitigate missed transactions for reporting. How can we proactively identify those that may have been misclassified? And we utilize some learning models for that on our back end that we think is pretty cool. But it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years. I think it's definitely the shift, but how's that going to come into play? And I really think there's a lot of proactive risk mitigation, especially around the monitoring and on the data capture side that I think is going to be drastically improved with the utilization of artificial intelligence.
I talk to a lot of people in the regulated industry space, which means financial services, banking, fintech, et cetera. And they, of course, have robust financial reporting regulation.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that in your industry, you may have at least or perhaps even more regulation you have to answer to. But the thing I see in the life sciences space is the need for transparency in addition to the robust reporting regulation. Is that just the way you have to do business now? And you have to be transparent, not simply to the regulators, but your business partners through your compliance program?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're running a good compliance program, you most certainly have to. And in the transparency reporting world, I think it's getting a little bit more closely monitored by the government, which ultimately means getting closely monitored by the business. At this point, within the United States, they've recently announced that they're actually auditing the data. At this point, there's been somewhere around a dozen or so audits based off of this data that's submitted to the government alone. And these audits are split based off of data you submit and maybe some oddities within that information. And there's a random component to that. And the government's come out and said that specifically. So I think it's a unique position we're in. Again, when we talk about the evolution and kind of the changing of the dynamic here, but transparency is really the only way to operate within a business, especially in the compliance world. And how do we continue to drive the business forward, make sure that they have the information to be successful, but we're ultimately doing what we need to do to meet our legal obligations as well. And that's a delicate balance.
Lucas, a little bit earlier, you mentioned just briefly about work outside the United States. Is the regulatory schemes outside the United States, or if you comply with US regulatory scheme, is that going to be enough? Or is it really a country by country analysis?
Yeah, it's unreal. It's a country by country at this point, and very seldomly is there overlap. I'll call complete overlap between countries. They all have their own nuances, their own unique expectations. Some are more specific, some are less specific. And this is something that's just changing literally by the month at this point. I know there's active monitoring of a couple of new countries that are instituting legislation as we speak. But yeah, it really is a country by country change, and that throws its own curveballs in how you manage that. Some folks are trying to build a kind of global reporting structure or infrastructure here that kind of houses all the data and then manages all the reports across the globe. Some are actually doing this country by country just because there's nobody better than in country people to manage the obligations, especially when you start talking language nuances there. But yeah, it really is a challenge in this space because there's so many different obligations, especially as you spread across the world. And even within the United States, states are coming out with new obligations every single year. Oregon was new. Connecticut replaced theirs this year with some new reporting obligations that are getting a little bit more sophisticated. So yeah, it's evolving for sure.
Lucas, I was going to ask you about your thoughts on the role of life sciences compliance down the road, but I think I want to maybe reformulate that a little bit because it sounds like the challenges of literally any size business in the life science space are going to continue to increase, but folks like you and services like TracedData allow you to deliver to them a service that is both cost effective and meets regulatory compliance. So, with that somewhat long winded introduction, is that the direction you see your target market, the smaller company that may be too small to have the actual full time personnel?
I think you have to, just with the expertise it requires in a lot of these different roles within a compliance program. You can't find that in a singular person. And I think we've seen people try to do that. And you hire folks and they're trying to do a little bit of everything. And it's a challenging model because when you try to do a little bit of everything, you end up with okay work across multiple areas versus exceeding work within specific specialties. So I think you're going to be hard pressed not to find some strategic partners. And there's great ones out there. Certainly, even within the space I operate in, there's some great partners to have. I don't think there's a way not to have that. Again, when you start growing in size, so you become, big pharma, big device, whatever it might be, budgets might account for some of this, certainly. But those small to mid-sized companies, you're working on either no compliance team and finance is handling this, or it doubles up to a single person compliance, maybe two people in your compliance program. And there are a million proactive things that need to be done that quintessentially can't be, as I call it, in-sourced or outsourced to a partner. And at that point, you have to pick and choose what can be. Transparency reporting is one of those ones where if you can get a really good partner that has the expertise, it's, I won't call it easy. I don't want to put me out of work here, but it's one of those certain responsibilities that you can have a strategic partner with and they can manage the day-to-day of those programs effectively. And the business doesn't need to miss a beat. Definitely a program that I think will continue to expand on expertise with outside partners for sure.
Lucas, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted any more information on TracedData or perhaps connect with you or get more information on you, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, it's a great place to start. I throw out a ton of free content on how to improve your transparency programs. So please feel free to reach out there. You can always visit me at my website, www.trace with a D, data.com, tracedata.com, or email me at lucas@tracedata.com.
Lucas, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I appreciate your time, Tom. Thank you.